My good friend Dom Sigalas recently released his new drum instrument, the modern 80s Kit Max. So what I decided to do is to use Dom's drum instrument as a mixing tool to layer some drum samples coming out of the modern 80s kit on an acoustic drum mix. And this is a mixing technique that I like to do, especially when I mix pop, rock, country music, to make my drum mix sound fat, huge, powerful, with lots of character. So first what I'm gonna do here is we'll jump in Cubase, we'll listen to the acoustic drum mix I'm gonna work on. We're then gonna look at the modern 80s kit, listen to how it sounds like, and I'm also gonna share with you my full mixing technique when it comes to layering drum samples coming from a drum instrument on an acoustic drum mix, all inside Cubase. So I'm not gonna use any external plugins. I'm only gonna use tools we have inside Cubase. All right, let's check it out. So let's have a quick listen to the drum recording. It's a pretty good drum sound, you know, but I want to add some samples just to add a bit more weight, character, tone, punch to this drum mix. So let's start by checking out Dom Sigalas Modern 80s Kit Max. Yeah, Max, that means there's a lot in that VSTI. So just so you know, it is available within Halion Sonic or Halion straight from Cubase. And this is where I have the VSTI loaded. It's a very nice VSTI drum, mainly aimed to get that old 80s drum sound, you know. So Dom took the time to sample a bunch of drum machines, like old vintage drum machines that he had access to. He sampled like a bunch of them straight to his analog gear to get the sound, tone, and recording the best possible. And you know what? He succeeded. And by the way, this is not even sponsored, okay? Dom was nice enough to give you a special coupon code to get, I actually forgot the amount of percentage. It's written down below, okay? And this is for thanking you for watching this video. I have my drum pad on my side here, and this is what I'm gonna use to test all those samples. I'm mainly gonna focus on kick and snare because this is what I'm gonna layer on my actual drum mix. So I'm gonna click on the modern 80s kit, and there you go. Look at all the presets, all the kits that were sampled. It's crazy. I'm just gonna try a few of them. So if we briefly look at the interface of the modern 80s Kit Max, at the bottom we have different types of sauces, sauce A, sauce B, which will add more to the samples. For example, a bit more punch on the snare, or a bit less. I can deactivate, you know, tightness. Okay, you know what? Okay, there's something I'm gonna do with this later. Okay, stick around because it's quite cool. And you know, tape warmth and so on. Same for the kick. Thump, definition. Cool, love it. So there's a snare reverser. Oh, this is cool. Love it, love it. On the right side, there's space where I just played the snare reverser. There's space B with other options as well. So there's a lot to work with. Like on the space B side, there's some reverbs. So let's go with... Oh, look at that. Snare Stadium. Whoa. Okay, I'm getting some very cool ideas. On top, you can play with the envelope of each sample. Now I have the snare selected under element. I can play with the attack. Okay, the decay, the curve. Super punch is, let's try it, you know. Let's bring up the amount to start with. Whoop, not the claps, the snare. Okay. Now, I'm looking at the snare right now, okay? So if I want to tweak on the kick, I'm gonna select the kick under Element, and I can even, from this basic sample that I loaded, I can change the kick sound to whatever other kick sound that I want, you know, just by clicking under Sample and tweak that up. I can even use those arrows to go from one to the other. Oh, okay, I'm gonna keep this one. This one is quite nice. Okay, now what I need to do, okay, I need to go back on my project window in Cubase and create some hit points, because I'm gonna convert the kick drum and the snare in MIDI notes, okay, because I'm gonna need MIDI notes to trigger the samples from the drum instrument. Okay, so now double clicking on my kick event, I'm gonna click on the left side, okay, on the left zone, and select hit points. Okay, so under the hit points tab, I'm gonna click on edit hit points. And now, depending on the amount of threshold and intensity, Cubase will create some hit points out of that kick recording. So if I play around with the threshold, I'll be able to get most of, if not all the hits into hit points, and I can fine tune with intensity, okay? And that should do it. So this is something I need to check to make sure that all the hits are really kick hits and not bleed coming from the snare, for example, you know, so that can happen. And I don't want that kick drum to be triggered by a snare hit. Okay, like this. Okay, this guy here is a snare, so I'm gonna need to go back. I'm gonna manage that with the threshold. All right, so let's bring the threshold so I don't get the snare. That should work pretty well. I only have the kick hits and it's not detecting the snares, and this is what I want. Okay, cool, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna do the same for the snare. Double click on my snare, making sure that edit hit points is on. And there you go. So this is, I actually worked on that one before, and it seems to be okay. Now, something I'm gonna show you right now, which is a very cool, quick tip for you. If I listen to this part, okay, there's a flam, okay? Now, the flam, for some reason, the second snare hit out of that flam is not detected by Cubase, okay, to add a hit point. So I'm gonna have to do this manually. So I'm gonna click on Option or Alt if you're on PC, and I'm just gonna click right at the beginning of that second hit, and that will create a hit point. So I just have to do it manually. Let's have a listen. There's two of them, all right? So let's go with the second one this time. And there you go. So that should do it. Okay, now that I have my hit points done, I'm gonna convert that into MIDI. So from the same hit point menu, I'm gonna go down to MIDI notes. I'm gonna start with my kick drum. And for velocity mode, I'm gonna keep it to fixed velocity. It's a rock song. The kick drum is pretty much constant, you know. There's not lots of velocity to begin with, but I could choose dynamic velocity if I wanted to. I'm gonna keep it to fixed. The pitch for this one, it's a kick drum, so C1 is gonna be what I'm gonna choose. And I'm gonna select new MIDI track. Click on OK. I'm gonna do the same with my snare. Click on MIDI notes. This time around, instead of C1, I'm gonna write D1, which is usually the general MIDI note for snares. Fixed velocity, same thing, new MIDI track, and there you go. And I'm gonna make sure the output of that MIDI channel is going straight into the Halion Sonic instrument. Okay, if I click on solo, okay, cool. So I'm gonna keep that as is. There's a few things I need to do that I'm gonna do before moving forward. So I'm gonna go back into the modern 80s kit, and I'm gonna go on their mixer this time. Now I have one channel fader for each instrument. One for the kick, the snare, the claps, toms, and so on. So what I'm gonna do in Cubase on the right zone and go straight on the Halion Sonic from the VSTI tab. And I'm gonna make sure that I activate outputs. This will activate the outputs of that instrument. So I'm gonna activate a few of them, And from the instrument itself, I'm gonna click on Update Outs. All right. Now, if I click under every single fader that I have within the 80s drums, I'm gonna have those new outputs. So the kick, I'm gonna send it to out 2, the snare to out 3. I'm gonna leave everything else as is. What happens here is in my project window, if I click on my Halion Sonic virtual instrument channel and extend that channel, I'm gonna see those extra outputs right underneath the main VSTI channel. And that will give me a channel for each output. That's my kick, snare. And this is going to be very useful. You know, when starting to layer drum samples with acoustic drums, you always have to check the phase and polarity relationship between the sample and the acoustic recording. And depending on the sample, you know, you might have to switch the polarity of one of the channel, and I usually opt to change the polarity of the sample channel opposed to the recording channel. So if I blend this with the actual recording, so I'm gonna first reverse the polarity of the snare. Way fatter this way, okay? So I'm gonna keep it as is. And for the kick, same thing. No, I'm gonna leave it off. So with the phase relationship of the samples and the recording, I'm getting like all the fatness, all the vibe, all the tone blended together, which is what I want. From this point, I can select the kick or the snare, just try other samples, you know. Everything is already routed with the outputs, so I can simply go under the sample menu and try any samples I want. Okay, let's try this one. That's pretty cool. I love this because it's a blend of some very cool drum machines samples from the 80s, blended with an acoustic drum. So I think the mix of both works pretty well. Okay, I'm gonna try something here that is quite nice, because something that I love to do also is to use a reverb or a room sample that comes from drum samples and blend this with my acoustic snare sound without necessarily using an actual reverb. So sometimes I'm gonna use that sample on its own, and sometimes I'm gonna use both a regular reverb and also the room sample. So if I go and listen to this sound again, okay, I'm gonna bring down the punch. Okay, no punch. I'm only gonna focus on the room type of sound. Okay, so I'm gonna keep the attack snare sound out of my acoustic drum and use the 80s drum snare sample only to add some sustain, a kind of a room and ambience effect to my snare sound. Okay, for the kick, kind of like this kick sound. Oh, nice. Okay, let's try this one with the kit. That's the kind of stuff that I like to do, and there's so many ways you can craft your own tone out of these samples just by using sauces A, sauces B, spaces A, spaces B, playing with the amp envelope, the super punch. It's very well done, but I really, really love those samples. Now that I'm done, I'm gonna bounce my 2 MIDI tracks, the kick MIDI and the snare MIDI track, into audio. And that will give me a bit more flexibility for phase relationship and time alignment. So I'm gonna go into the export audio mixdown. There's several ways I can export those back in the project, but I'm gonna click on a multiple from this point, select my 2 VSTI outputs, the out 2 and 3. I'm gonna make sure they are in stereo because there's some kind of room effects also on those samples that I'm using. And after export, I'm gonna click create audio track. In effects, I'm gonna leave that at inserts and strip, and that should do it. Here's the snare, and here's the kick. That's perfect. If you would like to experiment with layering drum samples on an actual drum recording, this is how you can do it within Cubase without having to load any other external plugins. Just by using the hit points and a virtual drum instrument, and you're good to go. And if you want to take a look at the Modern 80s Kit Max by Dom Sigalas, the link will be down below, and also a special coupon code for you, so you can get it at a cheaper price just because you watched this video. So this is thanks to Dom. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, take care and see you.